Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Joey Guarascio, head strength and conditioning coach at Florida Atlantic. Coach Guarascio hired on at FAU in January of 2020. Prior to coming to FAU, he was the head strength coach at Colorado State and assistant strength coach at Ole Miss, where he oversaw pro day and combine prep. He was the director of strength and conditioning at Northwestern State in Louisiana and intern for the legendary strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt at LSU. So welcome to the show, Joey.
Appreciate you having me on.
To get where you've got, you needed a lot of help, a lot of mentors, putting yourself in the right position, making the right moves. How were you able to reach out to other established strength and conditioning coaches, get them to take you serious, and then bring you in and help mature you as a strength coach?
I got lucky in my journey, especially when I was younger, just because I had three guys ahead of me that went to my college, that were at the same college as me, that wanted to be strength coaches. All three were a little bit older than me. So Dominic Stansky, who's the head strength coach at Auburn now, he's actually associate coach at Auburn. He knew what he wanted to do, and he told me flat out, he goes, "You want to get a job? You want to move up in this field? A, you need to get certified ASAP. B, you need to go work for Tommy Moffitt in some form of capacity." So again, I got lucky because I had guys come before me, and even before him, you had Chad Straver, who kind of was blazed the path, and he had a harder route. Like, he went to ULM, GA for a little bit, then he got a job at Augustana at D2 college, and then he was the head guy at Morningside. When you have guys of that caliber and guys that have gone and failed, and then they come back and tell you, like, all right, don't do this, do that, it gets pretty easy. Like I was telling you before we got live about my younger brother, who ended up having 3 internships and 2 certifications before he graduated because he saw all of us, because he's 5 years younger, 6 years younger than us, he saw all of us, and then for me, it was like, okay, get connected to LSU and have the opportunity to go down there and learn from them, watching these guys are a little bit ahead of you in your career, and you're watching, the standard of what they coach, the efficiency of what they do things, and then the intensity that Coach Moffitt drives and the knowledge it gives you. And it was like, man, I got to learn all this. And it was like Disney World to me. I tell them all the time, I was like, I had to go back to Northwestern State. I went from going and riding like roller coasters to riding the slide in the back of the yard. Like, it was just wild to see how crazy that was. And I would have been in that position if it weren't for the guys that came before me. You can learn from everybody, and I think having that growth mindset is critical, especially when you're young, man. Like, you need coaching experience. Like, that's my biggest pet peeve right now is there's a ton of smart people coming in to strength conditioning that can't coach. I've had kids, 4.0 GPA, master's degrees, 15 certifications. I'm like, all right, go coach that guy. And it's like, they're in a foreign country. They don't speak the language. And I'm like, man, like, if you can't, I was just telling one of my sisters who's a younger guy who's trying to figure it out. I'm like, if you do one thing right, learn how to coach at an elite level. All right, especially when you're an assistant. If you can coach at an elite level, you're going to have jobs. You can learn the foundation behind why you program, why you do this, why these X's and O's and all those things.
We'll kind of work through some of that. Now we'll start bringing in the athletes. Not every kid that comes into your program is as good in the weight room as what we would like to believe. Not every high school has the means, the way, and some of them don't even invest in the strength program like you'd want. So let's say you get them in there. How do you meet the kid where he's at? How do you evaluate and then get him up to speed as quickly as possible without overwhelming him?
Yeah, so this is a question that has changed over the last 2 years because of transfer portal.
That was a question I had further in there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, you get the high school kid, and I think for us, first week, I don't care where you come from. Okay, so we're going to teach. Now, if you come in week 1 and you can hammer out our teaching progression for Olympic lifts, you can hammer out and look great, or squatting progressions and all. Okay, you're probably going to get moved on and advance forward. And that goes for not only high school kids. We got a kid from Miami that never worked out. He ran track all off season. He played, 7-on-7 in the summertime. That's all he did. Unbelievable athlete, right? But he's never picked up weight. So I think what you have to do is you have to evaluate based off your teaching progression where they're at. You don't have to rush it, but I will say that there is a sense of urgency in advancing that athlete into harder training, knowing that especially like you have to get these kids ready for the demands of practice. Like the coaches are going to still try to play that kid. So how do you get as close as possible to meet them, but also get them going in the right direction at a faster rate and closer to what the general population of the team is doing? You know, especially like you look at transfer kids, like, you know, they might not have done Olympic lifting. We do a heavy dose of Olympic lifting, you know, but they might have been more of a you know, James Smith, like, we're going to sprint and then we're going to squat. So knowing that, like, coming in, they're going to be extremely good squatters, pressers, and pullers. And what are some substitutions as we teach these guys to increase rate of force development and power? You know, so those are some of the things that I've taken into consideration because I don't want to wait, right? Like, I get a kid, the transfer, I get him in the end of May, I have him for 8 weeks, and he's expected to play. It's almost morphing into like what the NFL is, as far as you get this group of people that come from all different places, and you just got to find the most efficient and the fastest way to train them at a higher level.
Okay, now you touched on that just a minute ago, kind of where I was heading next was rate of force development and using the vertical jumps and the broad jump for markers. So I'm sure you take a baseline, and then is that where you're evaluating how well your Olympic lifts and stuff like that are carrying over by the higher the vertical jump, the further the broad jump, you're kind of able to gauge progress?
There's not a direct linear correlation with Olympic lifts and vertical jump, but without a doubt, like rate of force development it's hard to measure without a force plate, right? Like that's the first thing. Like so, like hypothetically speaking, we can say if my Olympic lifts go up, if my vertical and broad went up, then my rate of force development, right? So we could say that. Now, 100% certainty, absolutely not, but we can say that. I think it's some things to look at as well is I like looking at velocities at percentages during our lower body movements, whatever it may be. I like looking at back squat. So what we do is that every 4th week, I put 90% on, and I tell them to hit that 90 as fast as they can possibly do. You know, we have standards on depth, we have standards on technique, so we don't let them lose their minds. But I want to see, okay, have they gotten stronger and can they move that bar faster? Because technically, if they can move 90% faster, the rate of force development is gone up. So that was one way to look at it. Another way is to look at different aspects of rate of force development. So we look at counter movement jump, we look at a static hold, and then with a pause, then a jump. So we put a dowel on their back, make them get into a quarter squat, 2 Mississippi, then jump. Okay? And then what we do is we also look at depth jump with standardized drop heights. So we're seeing different tasks, and we're also seeing if there's improvements there as well. So again, rate of force development, it's tricky if you don't have a force plate to directly measure it, but there is traits of it all over the place.
Okay, so talking about, you know, running your 90%, running a force plate, seeing the growth there, are you able to improve their maximum speed by using submaximal weights at higher speeds with faster eccentrics or even overspeed eccentrics?
That's something that, you know, for the last 2-3 years here that we've done, that I've seen dramatic increases in the concentric propulsive forces that we see these kids express, but high emphasis on the acceleration training, not only in the weight room but on the field as well. So like you said, high speed eccentrics, do a ton of them, whether it's a drop landing or depth jump or, you know, a DVD snap, a dumbbell snap down or a trap bar snap down. I think there's extreme value in it. You know, one of the main indicators of concentric rate of force development is eccentric rate of force development, right? It makes sense. The faster I can load, the further that rubber band can pull, and the thicker that rubber band is, when it snaps, it's going to be harder and faster. So, again, we put extreme value on that. We think, and I think there's a ton of high transfer, and not only from a performance standpoint, from an injury mitigation risk standpoint as well. What we've seen a huge decrease in ACL injuries. The year before I got here, there was 7. We had 3 that next year. We had 2 the following year. This last year we had 1. That's the entire year. And we got lucky. There's some luck involved with that, but also, I got to believe the training process helped aid that. Again, you're able to absorb or negotiate high eccentric force, right? Because we know on the left side of that force velocity curve, right, eccentric contraction is the only one where you can have high force and high velocity, right? You have the highest force values out of any of the 3 contractions, and you can have the highest velocity as well. You put those 2 together without training that, that's the cause for serious risk. So to answer your question, absolutely, there's high value. I think once you increase eccentric rate of force development, eccentric strength, I think you'll see higher concentric rate of force development, without a doubt. And those 90s pop, they'll move.
Right, yeah, because at the end of the day, it's all force is mass times acceleration. So no matter what the weight is, the faster you can move it, the more force you're going to generate.
And I think people, when they hear deacceleration, they don't realize deacceleration is a fancy word for saying negative acceleration. So it's the same. It is literally the same formula.
Yeah, it's just backwards. So it's quick stops. So like in your depth jump, it's collecting yourself at the bottom.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah. It's how fast you get down there. And acceleration is measured in average acceleration for a DBP, right? It's like 5.7 meters per second squared. Well, deacceleration is literally the same. It's just negative. It's the same value. It's just, again, it's the opposite. And then when you look at what I love about when I talk about deacceleration training or deacceleration, the technical side of it, it's the opposite of acceleration, right? So acceleration, you want a forward lean, you want to strike behind your center of mass, you want extension, right? Whether it's hip, knee, whatever it is, you want extension. When you teach deacceleration, it's the opposite. You want a backwards lean, and you want to strike in front of your center of mass, and then you want maximum flexion everywhere, hip, knee, and ankle. So it's just funny how, like, not only from like a numerical value is it opposite, but also from a technical side, it's directly opposite as well.
And then I would imagine you see the carry over the field by the amount of acceleration a kid can display, but every kid at your level is fast. So it's really coming down to how fast can he stop, how fast can he change directions, and how well his body can absorb all that at one time.
It's allowing him to use that V8 engine better, right? So when you train conceptually, you're building that engine. And I think so many, and I'm guilty of it, like the first part of my career, more than the first part of my career, but you want to make them explosive, you want to make them jump far, you want to make them run fast. But then if you don't train the deacceleration and change direction mechanics, they don't feel comfortable at those new speeds. So their change of direction and deacceleration might actually suffer because they don't know how to use that newfound speed. They don't know how to use that newfound force, right? It's like saying, oh, yeah, it's just going to work. They'll figure it out. But if you don't train it, if you don't train and train the technical side of that deacceleration, increase the eccentric rate of force, increase the eccentric peak force, okay, I'm a receiver. I've been used to running around at 16 miles an hour. But now I have the capabilities of running this route at 18 miles an hour. But I haven't been practicing stopping and changing direction, going into it at 18 miles an hour. And then you go and see a whole bunch of non-contact incidents. Well, they weren't prepared, ready for those forces, the stopping forces that accompany that newfound propulsive force. So not only do I want to build that engine, but I want to tune the suspension. And I want to get the brakes to where they can handle it. Like, I want to make sure the brakes match the engine and the suspension. So now that they can not only run at 18 miles an hour in that route tree, but they can also change direction and stop 2 yards shorter than what they previously had.
That makes so much sense. It's unbelievable. I mean, you don't sit there and think about it. You're always thinking about pushing the concentric side of it all. But yeah, you could outrun your suspension really quickly.
I like drag racing, like cars. So I use a lot of car metaphors. Like and I've seen it before. On we had an eighth of a mile, about 20 minutes from my house, and you could tell like who really knew what they were doing because their car was able to stop at the end of the runway. Versus sometimes these guys are hitting the brakes and you see them calipers just burn red because they couldn't stop it, but the speed was too much for the caliper. Like It's the same for athletes. Like Skilled players live between 13 and 19 miles an hour. If you're elite, you run your routes, you're around 18, right? Because if I'm able to run a 12-yard pitch and I'm able to get to 17, 18 miles and put the brakes on and stop in 3 steps and turn my shoulders, you're going to create separation. Skill guys, they live in between that 13 and 19 mile an hour range. Okay, the guys that like really create separation, they're able to stop and change direction at fast speeds. So they're able to stay at the top of that continuum. They're able to stay in between versus, 16 to 19 versus the guy that has to stay at 12 to 15 to change speeds fast. So those are the guys that are elite. I watched Justin Jefferson do routes yesterday, and it's like, this dude is riding. I'm talking 18, 19 miles an hour, and he's able to stop in 2 steps. So like, those are the things that separate guys. Yeah, I think that you have to have a certain level of speed, without a doubt, right? Like I tell people all the time, like the bouncer at the door for the NFL, you have to run 21 miles an hour if you're a skill guy. Like if you don't run 20 miles an hour, you ain't getting in the club, right? But the difference is whether or not you get a VIP or not is going to be your ability to change direction and stop. That's going to be the difference. If you can do all that and run 22, 21 miles an hour, like now you're going to get in the VIP section versus just getting in the club.
Yeah, when you get up there, speed's everywhere. So you have to figure out a way to separate yourself somehow. Now, as you're looking at programming a team for a season, and you're working through your macrocycle, mesocycle, microcycle, what do they give you as your starting point? So let's say you play in a bowl game, so the football season's over 1st of January. When do you start, and how long are you looking out? Are you programming out to spring ball, or are you programming past that? How does that work out?
Because you're always at the mercy of the calendar.
Yes.
Okay, and coach's discretion. Like, I've been in places where spring ball was all the way at the end of April, so you had 10, 11 weeks. I've also been in a place where we had 5 weeks and we did spring ball, right? So I think the way you have to look at it, you have 2 seasons. There's 2 parts to my philosophy. I want to create the fastest, more violent, and aggressive team in the country. Right, so that means explosive training performance. That means build the engine, build the brakes, all that good stuff, right? But then I also want, the second part of my philosophy is I need to prepare the athletes to adapt and thrive in practice, right? Because that's where you get better. When you practice skill, you get better at whatever skill you're doing. Well, skill execution comes in practice. I have to build my model based off the time frame given me. This year we had 8 weeks. Like I have to prepare for the spring season, and then we reboot, and then we have to prepare for the actual season. Because I think there's this fallacy that you prepare for a 15-week season, which is bullshit. You don't, right? Residual effective training for strength is 30 days. For aerobic capacity, it's 35 days. So every 4 weeks, just reboot. Right? I'm preparing them for camp, is what I'm doing. And really, only the first about 2.5, 3 weeks of camp. Because then camp is preparing them for actual in-season or practice. Your training's going to wear off by week 2. Okay? And then it's going to be, what are you doing in practice, and what are you doing in season lifting? I look at it 2 different seasons. I'm looking at first 4 weeks. I'm looking at increase, okay, our peak force capability, so maximum strength. I'm looking to increase our rate of force development. I'm looking to increase our endurance. And when I mean endurance, I mean it's the ability to repeat a specific task. Because I think that's a bastardized term. I don't like how people use it, because when you say endurance, people automatically think of like cross-country runners and running, 110 tests. That's not what that is. It's the repeatability of a specific task, right? And then the last capacity we're going to increase is short week cycle. So in that first 4 weeks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm leaning heavier on endurance and peak force. Then, as we get closer to spring ball, we move more towards rate of force, and we move more towards our stretch shortening cycle, our plyometric or elastic ability or reactive strength. Okay, as I'm training those 4 capacities, I'm training 4 general skills. All right, that they're all the locomotion demands of the game. Okay, so you got acceleration, deceleration, change direction, maximum velocity capabilities. A big guy reaches top speed at 13 yards versus a skill guy at 20 yards. Maximum velocity skill guys around 18, 19, 20 miles an hour, but for a big guy, it's 16 miles an hour, and they do hit 16 miles an hour in practice. So don't tell me they'll reach maximum velocity. So those are the 4 general skills we're going to train, all right? Same as with the peak force, because we're concurrently training these things. We're going to train acceleration because we can do a bunch of acceleration work, 10-yard starts, resistance starts, 20-yard starts early in training. Okay, we could do a ton of short area change direction early in training, and we could do some of the early progressions for deceleration training. All right, as we build up our tolerance for more plyometrics, more high speed running, and more high entry level deceleration. Okay, that will end up getting into those last 4 weeks leading up to sport. All right, another way that we increase specificity is we go from a 4-day model to a 5-day. We have OTAs now, essentially. Like, they change rules. So, like, coaches get hands-on and actually teach skill, like specific skill. So what we do is we build our model out from capacity, general skill in those first 4 weeks to more specific skills, which are going to be backpedaling, run around, scoring the football, all those different things. Okay. But also some higher end general skills. So like the maximum velocity, plyometric ability of those guys. And then we also added the OTAs, the skill acquisition, and the tactical side. We had meetings and all those different things twice a week on top of training 3 days out of that week performance-wise. So we're building the density so that when we go to spring ball, the first time they work 5 days in a row isn't in spring ball. They've already done that, right? And then we compare total yardage. We're looking at total yardage accumulation through the week. We had more total yardage accumulation weeks 5 through 8 than we did in the first 2 weeks of our spring ball. So to me, again, like the first time a receiver touches 6,000 yards in a practice, or it touches 6,000 yards, it better not be in a practice. It better be in a conditioning session. All right, because then if it's the first time in a practice, we're in trouble. Okay, because I want him to have that reserve. Okay, and you hear a lot with Charlie Francis talks about speed reserve, right? It got popular. If you run 20 miles an hour and you get tired and you're at 80%, you're about 60 miles an hour. Well, if I go to 22, now when I get tired at 18, well, you can take that and move that towards any specific biomotor ability. Not just speed. You can move towards strength. You can move towards work capacity, tissue tolerance, all these different things, and use that same thing. And that's how I look at it. Is like I want to build extreme levels of reserves on all of our capacity. Okay, all of our general skills. Like I want them to be able to handle high volumes, high intensities, high densities of all of these general skills and capacities, so that when you go into sport, not only are they prepared for that sport, but they recover at a faster rate. And then when we get into summertime, which is that second season, getting ready for that real season, we just speed the process and progressions up. We cycle through them at a faster rate, and we get the really more specific training block faster than we did in that first go around.
Through all this, I mean, I know you got just some absolute freaks in your weight room. When is your evaluating lifts? Do you decide when, that lift we're actually overreaching? Let's say you have a kid that's squatting 750. When do you say 750 is enough? Let's work on something else that's going to carry over to the field better. I mean, you're not looking at building 1,000-pound squatters or, let's say you got a guy benching 535. When do you say 535 is enough? Our time could be spent doing something else right now.
The time it takes for me to get my guy that squats 700 to 710 might be 6 months to a year, right? Versus if I take a approach where, okay, this dude is strong as hell already. Now, let's increase his rate of force though. Let's put a higher training prescription, a higher volume accumulation on his rate of force development. So we can increase his 10, we can increase his broad jump, we can increase his Olympic lifts, his cleans. Because that's going to have higher transfer to what he does in the field, right? Because I think, again, you got to look at, when you look at specificity of events or transfer of training, right? Biomechanically, is similar. Okay, and then is the time of movement similar, and are the ground reaction forces similar? Okay, so what we did was we looked at tape and we broke down like pillar movements of each position. Like whether it's a receiver on a release, or O-lineman kicks the sliding or a bucket step on a zone concept, whatever it may be. And we registered and tracked how long it took for that movement, right? And you'd be shocked at the fact that majority of these football movements are under 500 milliseconds. Like a kick slide was at like 320 milliseconds on average. Like my beef now is, okay, dude, I got you stronger. Why are you not tracing to the field? Well, because there's that bridge from general to specific. You didn't cross it all the way. It's a pier versus a bridge. You got halfway. You can see the other side, but you didn't connect. That's where you climb that hierarchy of training. You climb that hierarchy of specificity and skill acquisition. And you're going to make sure, okay, like my whole lineman got stronger, but now it's this acceleration, deceleration high, right? Because 500 milliseconds, okay, is the minimal time to achieve maximal force output. All right, and if that means only one or two movements on the entire football field fit that category, like I need to get to more transferable time frames, which means I got to do things more explosive and I got to do things in a faster rate of time. Right, and the only way to do that is to climb into more explosive, more rate of force development, dominant exercises. So now I'm not saying like the bigger you are, the more important absolute strength and relative body strength is, without a doubt. Right, but is the time of sport movement improving? Right, like Jaworski talks about the explosive strength deficit. Okay, what's that explosive strength deficit look like? And then he also talked about like how do you determine what sports performance or what improvement is in sport? And it's essentially his definition was when the speed of the sport movement increases, then that is when you see actual performance increase. So are you getting these guys to kick slide faster? Are you getting these guys to that we talk about separation of break point for a receiver, all of these different things? Well, the only way to do that is to climb the continuum specificity. Like we could say general skills are getting better, but our specific skills.
The way you said that in there, that, you know, a pier to a bridge, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe that's why at the lower level, weights don't get the look they probably deserve, because they're not carrying it through to see the results in the field, because they're not getting the specificity of the deacceleration and the carryover.
The novice kid that's never done anything is going to get better just because he's doing more. Right, so like you get your middle school kids, you get your freshmen and sophomores in high school. Like, yeah, they need a ton of general training, but I do also think to prepare them for the sport from, again, that injury mitigation side of it, I think there is a line of specificity that you do have to cross.
Yeah, I think that makes plenty of sense. I think you've broken that down where that's a concept that's pretty easily grasped after you talked about it, where maybe before putting those two pieces together is difficult to understand. How do you find a way to resonate with the kids at their level while also dealing with administration at a totally different level? So on the floor of the weight room, you're one guy, but then you have to go into an office with an AD, a head coach, very professional, and be another guy. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think you got to have fun. I think that's the biggest thing. I think you got to, I tell my students all the time, energy gives, energy you get. So, like, I want these kids to have an enjoyable experience. Like, training's not easy. Nothing easy about training. Like, it's not fun. You know, it's literally suffering. And you got to get them to enjoy the suffering, right? And the only way to do that is to be a positive motivator. Like the kids nowadays, like they need 5 pats in the back for every, one slap and, one, hey, get your ass right. Like they need it. You got to celebrate all the small wins, right? And I think you have to be extremely consistent. You got to be halfway too. Like we listen to more Kodak Black and ETSG. I could name all the new rappers, right? Like I put their music on. I blast it too. Like I don't play it to where they can't be coached, but I blast it. Like I want them to have fun. I don't want them to be robots. I want them to have personality. I also want them to be accountable and have a sense of urgency and attention to detail. So I think meeting them halfway, having a good sense of humor, knowing when to be extremely strict on them, and knowing when to crack a joke or, chest bump somebody, all those things. Like, I think that's important. I think the more consistent you are, the easier it is. And then it comes back to relations, right? Like the relationship side of for me, you got to connect with these kids on an individual level. Like, and that means spending a lot of time, right? Because they're not gonna let me lead them and listen to me unless they trust me. It's not a popularity contest, but they gotta like you in some capacity, right? And they definitely have to respect. Like, you have to emulate what you're explaining them and teaching them to be. I'm like, hey, I want you to be hard working, but then they show up for meetings at 4:00 and I went home at 1:00, right? Like, you gotta emulate that. You gotta give them the energy you want. You gotta make it enjoyable. You gotta coach them hard too. Like, we coach our guys hard. And I think when they understand the fact that you know what you're doing, that's something we do all the time. We give them a ton of feedback, and they'll run to a brick wall. And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks for a kid to buy all the way in and love you and do exactly what you want. And there's a kid who's my guy on this team. Like, it took me a year and a half to crack that sucker, man. And it was this kid, like, he's like, you ain't gonna quit. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm the most stubborn dude in the building, bro. You run into a buzzsaw. Stop. I said, you're gonna get tired before I do. Just stop. Like, and he's a great player for us, and now he's a great leader for us, and you got to continually teach. That's the biggest thing. Is you never know who's listening that day, and you never know when the light switch goes on. Like, I get asked that question all the time. Like, are you, like, from my assistant, like, do you get sick and tired of, like, repackaging, saying stuff over? I said, no. I go, you know why? Because tomorrow might be the day I had 3 guys that listened and took it to heart. Tomorrow might be the day where I have 4. And that 4th one might be the guy that makes a play in game 12 that gets us to the conference championship. They got to see you put the work in. They have to. They have to see you be consistent. They have to see that you're honest. And I think when you have that trust, you go and you show them that honesty even when they're not doing right, they respect. I tell my assistants, we're always recruiting coaches, players, and administration. You are in the recruiting business, okay? The reason I got this job, I got retained. So a previous head coach got fired, right? And I get retained, which is unheard of nowadays for a strike coach. The reason I got retained, okay, there was an assistant coach that immediately got retained because of a previous relationship with the head coach, right? He was one of my biggest supporters. He advocated for me, okay? The president of the university is a big numbers guy. And if you follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you know I love numbers. I love showing data and all that. True story. I was in my interview with the head coach, and the president of the university walks in to meet the head coach. Okay, he introduces him to CSCCA, and he looks over at me. He looks at the head coach. He goes, that guy over there, you better keep him. And the head coach to me, he goes, did you set this up? I go, Coach, I swear to God, I didn't set it up. I swear, okay? But it's because every time he came in, you got to shake his hand. Like you said, you have to be a different person. You just have to be a more professional version of what you are on the floor. On the floor, cuss, act a fool and have fun. Like, I hate people that knock the guys that have energy and the juice guys, right? Like, I can't be both. I can be a scientist when I'm programming, and then I could be a friggin' meathead and a juice guy, exactly what I was when I was playing on the floor. And I can still coach at a high level.
Right. Yeah.
I can still I ain't just going to scream. I'm going to coach the technical side up there with anybody else in the country. I'll put that on. I'm going to say, you put me on forward anybody. I'm going to try to out coach him. I might yell up call. Like Dave Tate makes people all the time. It's funny. But like, or I might just start rapping a rap song. Like, that doesn't mean I can't do that. Like, football is its own like little mini society, right? Like, and if you've never been around it, you'll never understand it until you're around it. Like, you can have fun with these guys. They need that, right, to keep them going. Versus like the professional side, like I gotta, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir. Like I speak more proper. Like, I open up my vocabulary a little bit. But I don't change who I am. Like, my values are still my values. I still act the same. Like when I meet with the AD or the head coach, like there's still a high level of urgency. There's still a high level of intensity all the time. Like there's still it's just I could show different aspects. I could show my organization skills. I could show my interpersonal skills. I could show different things with the administration and head coach than I can necessarily with players all the time.
Now, I was watching an interview with Phil Matus the other day. He was at Ohio State. Now he's at Boston College, strength coach. He was talking about, and I thought this was unique, and I wanted to get your take on it. The 10-80-10 rule. So 10% of your guys are ultra elite. 80% are your just hardworking guys that need the weight room, need the reps, need the help. And then you have your bottom 10 that kind of squeaked through the cracks and got in. The 80 is what you probably work. I mean, they're going to take care of themselves. How do you reach the 10 on the top and the 10 on the bottom?
So, like, you mean from a program standpoint or from a culture standpoint?
It'd probably actually be more cultural, I would think.
So I love it, right? Like, it's an easy way to illustrate where you are in the continuum of buy-in. Okay, and it goes back to Coach Smith at Ohio State. He's one of the originators of this. But I look at it like this: like your top 10, you're always recruiting. Okay, but their job is to recruit the other 80. So they got to bring people along with them. I tell them that all the time. I'm like, you're not a good leader unless people follow you. And I think they're just like how I have levels of influence because of my job status, but then also the trust that goes along in that. The same way that I try to gain trust with the team is the same way that we try to teach our leaders to gain trust with their players, with their peers, right? And they got to bring people with them. Okay, because I look at it like this: the 80% is on the fence. They could go to the bottom 10 or they could go to the top 10. Okay, and it's coach's job, it's the leaders of the team's job, it's the culture that you build there to move those guys up to that top 10, that upper echelon. Right? Your top 10 guys, like, you know who they are, right? They're great players, they're great people, okay? And they're usually check all the boxes, right? Like they're the kid that you're like, yeah, I'll let my daughter date that guy. Okay. Now, how do you get the kid that might have, there's 5 boxes at the top 10 check, he's missing that one box. How do you get that leader to go help that kid check that box? And I think that's where you have to have a learning curriculum in place. I think that there has to be clarity in what the values of the program are. I think there has to be extremely clear standards. And I think there has to be extremely clear consequences to those standards. Right? That bottom 10, man, like listen, that bottom 10 got that previous head coach fired. Okay? If you're in the business of trying to save kids, I will forever try to help the kid. Okay? That doesn't mean that I want the kid on the team. I'll still try to help. Okay? But the team is more important than the individual. All right, that bottom 10, you want to save that kid, man, become a priest. Okay, they can't help you. They can't help you win. And a lot of times they will actually help you lose more than they'll help you win. They'll recruit and pull that 8 in the wrong direction. They can't help you win. So my job is to help coach identify who really is that bottom 10. Whether it's, lack of performance increases, whether it's accountability issues, whether it's just general attitude. Like, there's always a list, right? There's always a list. You want to limit that list. And the thing that I've noticed, especially this year, because what we've done is we've started to eliminate some of the bottom 10 guys. They're fighting the culture every single step of the way, right? What I've noticed is when we started eliminating those kids, I'm like, listen, you're probably a good kid. Maybe you're not. You're just not a good fit here. You're not doing what we ask you to do. You're not a good fit here. What I've noticed is the 80s changed. All right, so we've elevated the floor, which is intern has elevated the ceiling. The attention to detail on workouts become a lot more serious and on point because you remove distractions. Okay, effort level goes higher because there's more guys competing at a higher level and there's less of those guys in the back. All right, so again, that floor elevates and it raises the ceiling. We're gonna have another one of those moments at the end of spring ball, right? Like, because of COVID, we're over on scholarships. Like, we have to, remove kids from the roster just to sign our incoming class. Okay? But we're in college football, man. It's competitive. I'm here to mentor. I will continue to mentor, even kids that are no longer on the team. You have to have that personnel be extremely competitive and move that in the right direction. The only way to do that is to recruit more 80 and 10%, top 10% players and bring them into your organization, cycle the bottom 10 out. Like, why is Alabama so good? Because every kid that goes to Alabama either is an extreme competitor and thinks that they're going to start their freshman year, sophomore year, and works for it, or they leave. There's no in between. You know, like, you have that kid who's like a top 10 in athleticism and then top 10 mindset. And he walks in that building like, yeah, like, all right, cool. I'm glad you're an All-American. I'm going to beat you out. I'm going to work. I'm going to show you how. Or he's like, I can't beat you out. I'll beat you. Either way, you get better.
Yeah, you don't get drugged down and you're always moving up. So in the business that you're in and combine prep and all the other things you do, you're dealing with kids with extremely high hopes and dreams. And your job as a coach and a mentor is to help them achieve those dreams. How are you able to manage that on your side of it? Not getting too high or too low with the kid. I mean, you want the best for the kid, but if it just doesn't work out, how do you keep that business?
I think you just the honesty side of it. Like, so when we compare numbers, I don't compare them to like kids on the team. I compare them to combine. I'm like, all right, you want to be in the NFL, but you're going 4.7, you're a receiver. Like, the combine average is 4.48. You know, that's an easy conversation. They're easy in a sense that it's easy to give them that information. Okay, but then it's also a hard conversation because you are giving them that information. And you do want to help them. Like, you want these kids to be realistic with what they got going on. But I think that's where, if you do that immediately when they get on campus, you're consistently honest with them all the time versus, hey, I'm selling you a dream, I'm selling you a dream, I'm selling you a dream. Here's butterflies and rainbows. Oh, by the way, you're not good enough to play in the NFL. I lied to you for 4 years. Then it's like, what the heck, coach? Like, I would have took school more serious. I would have lined up more internships to get a job. You know, like, that to me is where, like, you have to do a really good job. Not only, like, for me, is like, I'm always trying to educate these kids on, what are you doing after football? Like, are you, and nowadays, the NIL stuff, like, the name of image like this thing, like, are you professional? Like, are you shaking people's hands consistently? Are you introducing yourself to people? You know, all of those things matter. Okay, I think also something we do here is I've been fortunate enough to run across enough NFL scouts to be friends with a few of these guys and having the NFL guys tell them where they stand. I think that's really big as well. We did this last offseason, guys are contemplating some decisions. And I'm like, dude, I don't know where you're getting your information. I'm getting it from where you want to go. You know, like, you might want to listen. Like, you don't want to listen to me? All right, well, we talk on the phone real quick. You know, and having them discuss those things. I think having a lot of NFL players around as well helps these guys out so they understand how cool that business is. Like, every Tuesday in the NFL, they bring in players to try out for the team. Like, you're a number. They don't care about you. Like, I think these kids sometimes think it's going to be like college and like, oh, yeah, I'll just make it because the coach liked me personally. Like, they don't give a shit about you personally. So you're a number. You're a stock. Is it good stock or bad stock? If it's bad stock, they're going to dump it.
Getting ready for the season, dealing with everything that comes in and out of a kid's life. You got coaches you're dealing with. How do you know when they're ready for the season? What metrics are you looking at and says, yeah, coach, they're ready?
I think you got to look at some of the GPS data, some of those things that go on, you know, like heart rate efficiency, yards, all that, performance special. I think you definitely do. But I think the markers of good teams, it's chemistry, consistency, like, and those are things that you're going to see in the accountability side. Like, if I say, hey, Saturday we have open hours at the gym, how many guys show up? Is it 12 or is it 75? How does the team interact? What is the locker room focus? Like, what is it? Because those things are important. You know, I mean, the performance side, I don't want to knock the performance side because it is. If you have a group of great guys, they are very, very average athletically, you're probably not going to win a lot of games, right? Like, so you need that side of it. But the most talented team I ever saw was 5-7. We had 7 guys drafted when I was at Ole Miss in 2016, and they were 5-7. You know, so again, like, there is something to that camaraderie side, chemistry side, the consistency side. Like, there's definitely something in those lines, and you're going to see that show up in, their behavior every day, their attitude, like other areas, like academics, so they being more consistent. That's something I personally keep an eye on. Right, we do hydration testing twice a week. Is that trending in the right direction? Like body fat improvements, like, because those are habits. Those are things outside of you that I don't control. I think that's really going to determine where you go as a team.
Now, hitting on what you kind of talked about in there, how closely do you and your staff work with the nutritionist? Being in a D1 program, you have access to nutritionists. I'm sure you probably got, food plans for the kids, all that stuff. How closely does your training correlate with what the nutritionist is doing?
So I'm her direct oversight. So she actually she comes to me for everything. She's at every staff meeting with our staff. She hears how we train. If it's hard training, she's up in calorie intake. She's up in carbohydrate intake, whatever it is. Our plans are synonymous. They go together. But she does a fantastic job. Her name's Abby. She's unbelievable. She's a registered dietitian, so she can extend her hand a little bit further than just your normal Division I strength or nutritionist. And we give her full support. Like, so, because she can tell a guy, you do this, and he'll be like, yeah, yes ma'am, and walks away and doesn't do it, and then I catch him not doing it, and I'm on his ass. Right, that consistency in the program, it definitely drives her program as well as our program, because it goes together.
Yeah, there's no way for her to track her progress if you can't get kids to do what she's asking them to do. She's just kind of in limbo. So by having your support and keeping tabs on what's going on, it has to make your program more constant.
Exactly.
Now, the pressures of D1 football are just immense on you, on the head coaches, on the athletes, everything involved between preparing, game day, social media. How do you decide when it's time to get the kids out of the weight room? Like I saw on your Instagram the other day, you guys had like beach workouts. When do you decide, hey, we got to get out of here for a little bit and get them refocused on something else? Just, maybe just for a day, but we got to do something.
Yeah, I think, again, you got to make it fun, right? Like, you got to throw them a bone. It's probably once every 4 to 8 weeks, maybe twice in that block. But, like, run a Devo week. All right, I could lose a day. Coach, want to play basketball with them? Sure, let's go. I'm not losing nothing that day. So to me, it's like you try to plan it on Devo weeks. You try to plan it in areas like, if I have a week off. So, like, the last thing they did there, they might have did 5 weeks of friggin' grind training, right? But the last thing they did was like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to get back. There's obviously the opportunity times to do it. And you got to be strategic in that. You don't want to go out, to the beach every other week and lose a whole training day. There has to be training in place, right? Like, there has to be training. Or else then the fun day is just another day.
And what you're doing now, if you were subtracted from the equation, what would FAU look like? What would the players notice? What would the coaching staff notice if you just vanished?
I'll give you the answer I would like to say is, if you are a good leader, okay, when you, there's a book called Good and Great, right? And he talked about these, I think it was like level 5 leaders. When they leave organizations, when they move on, the organization continues the trajectory it's on, right? Because of the blueprint and the foundation that leader has set. So I would like to say that would happen. I think we're still building towards that right now. I think the thing that they will lose is the energy and the intensity that I like to bring to what is training for you practice. And then I think just the organizational side, and attention to detail things. Like if something's not right, I don't care whose department it is, I'll make it right. We'll fix it. Like, coach, the field goal post isn't the right color. Yes, sir. Like, it's gonna get done. I don't care. Like, I feel like there's no job too big or too small for me and for my department. Right? Like, I'm gonna pick up trash outside the weight room, or I'll go sit in the AD meeting some of the biggest boosters and explain to them why we need more money.
Well, I think that's a good answer. I didn't really know what I expected you to say, but the way you answered that, I think it makes a lot of sense. That means you left the program better than you found it, and it's increasing daily because of the trajectory you put it on. So, as busy as you are, Coach, the time you took to spend with me and sit down and explain some of these things, I can't thank you enough. So, I hope the rest of your day is great, and thank you for being on the show.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.